certainly for a start, keep dreaming and chase your dreams as much as you possibly can. And with that, then believe that you're capable of chasing that dream, because that's where I came unstuck a number of times. I think that, I doubted in my abilities, or, there were detractors of what I was doing. And so that threw doubts into my mind till I got to that point of me understanding me. I don't think a 9-year-old is capable of that. They can understand their small world a little bit maybe. But firstly, just keep dreaming, chase your dreams and back yourself all the way.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Few with me, Boo, and my good pal, Sean. How are you, mate?
Hey, Boo. Really good, mate. Really good up here in sunny Noosa. I hear that Sydney's been turning on the weather for you, or maybe not?
It's very much unsummer here at the moment. In fact, I just got back from the US, where it's fall, autumn, and it was far balmier and more beach weather than it is here. So anyway, I'm sure things will look up pretty shortly. Hey, pretty excited today. Bit of a legend on the show, and we're going to make a detour into the sporting realm and see where we can learn some lessons from someone that's, probably really is one of the few, don't you think?
Absolutely. With the results, the history, the background, the influence, absolutely. I would put our guest, today's guest, in that category for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, with no further ado, we've got the coach of what's widely regarded as our greatest sporting team, one of the greatest eras in Australian cricket, John Buchanan. John, thanks so much for joining Sean and I on the show today.
Great pleasure, Boo and Sean.
Great to have you, John.
Here. Yeah.
Hey, John, how does it feel when people say something like that? You're at the helm of the greatest team in all time. What does that mean to you?
Well, yeah, a range of things, I suppose. I mean, one, it's fantastic to have been part of that. It was a real privilege to be there. As a young boy growing up, like everybody, you have a whole range of different dreams, don't you? My dream was to put on the baggy green cap and play for Australia. And, I chased that dream for a period of time, but unfortunately abilities went one direction and, ambition was sort of going in another direction. So I had to change those dreams, but eventually I was fortunate enough to be that head coach of an Australian team in an era where there were some great players and we achieved some fantastic things. So that's always tremendous to have been a part of. And, as I said, it was just a great privilege to be there.
That's amazing. One thing I really enjoy when we have interviewed people from the sporting arena for the podcast so far is the correlation, the simple correlation between, a lot of our listeners are in businesses and run teams and would love to run high performing teams within those businesses as well. And I mean, obviously a sporting team or a team within a business has some very similar dynamics. Where do you see some of those direct correlations in, leading a sporting team versus, say, people that are running businesses with teams?
Well, I think you just mentioned one of them there, Sean, and you talked about high performance. Well, I guess I say peak performance, a bit of a play on words, I suppose, but it just seems to me that, leaders of teams, which is, in a sporting sense, coaches and captains and so on, and maybe some senior members of that team, but within a business sense, it's boards, it's CEOs, it's that senior leadership team. They have to be very clear, I think, on setting an aspiring as well as an inspiring vision, something that's really going to stretch the groups that they have and the organisation that they have. And then they've got to understand, well, where are we now? And then, therefore, what are the steps that we need to take to get there? So from vision, then it's about strategy. From strategy, then it's about establishing your real, what I term a leadership culture, which is from the leaders who have got to lead by example. They've got to live and breathe and do everything that says peak performance all the time. And then, of course, they can't just do it by themselves. They really require their staff, their people, anybody associated with the business to lead as well. So they might not have a formal title. There's a fantastic book from Robin Sharma that talks a lot about that, leading without title. And it is so important that people within your business, or athletes within your team, or support staff within a sporting team, lead by doing, lead by action, lead by their behaviours, so that then you really begin to establish a really powerful leadership culture. Then you've got to tie in other bits and pieces around that. Your systems and your processes have really got to support that. One of those is your learning environment, your ability to try and grow your people, try and grow the organisation. So to me, it was always important. Obviously, the players didn't necessarily want to leave the team, but in a business sense, you've got to grow people so that you're prepared to lose them. So they outgrow your business, but you're really doing them a great service in terms of growing them. And then beyond that, you've got to get the right people, and you've got to be able to measure how you're moving, whether you're going in the right direction or not. So that, I think there's some of the things that really correlate between sport and business.
And John, just to build on what you said there, or make sure I understand that, is what you're saying then that it's actually the responsibility of everybody in the team to show up in their own right as a leader, to be able to support the outcome, as opposed to leaders, I suppose, being the people at the top, and then there's everyone else sitting in amongst them or below them.
Yeah, totally, Sean. I mean, I guess one of my sayings was always to try to have the individual person be their own best coach. Yep. So, in a sporting sense, and we were obviously playing at an elite level, so that meant that their skill levels, they needed to be able to deliver those on a regular basis all the time. Now, it's all very well to have coaches and all very well to have good support systems and so on. But at the end of the day, they needed to go out on the field and make decisions, based around game plans, etc. But nonetheless, plans never really sort of flow as you put them together off field, because there's so many other things that are going to happen, because you just can't predict what the future is going to bring you. So therefore, you want the individual person to be able to respond to what's been thrown at them and make good decisions, and then good execution of those decisions all the time. So to do that, that person has got to take on that responsibility and that accountability to do it for themselves, but also to do it for their teammates around them. And then the other part that then you throw into that is, well, it's all very well to have a whole group of individuals, but we really need to pull this thing together as a team. So then it's about how I, as an individual, whether it be the head coach or whether it be the player, how do I contribute to the team culture as opposed to just looking after myself?
There's a saying out there, John, and you've probably heard it before. What would you rather, a team of greats or a great team? And you obviously had both. So what were some of the leadership challenges when you have a team of strong leaders and getting the most out of them without having the clashes, or maybe accepting that there's clashes and competition, but nurturing that in a positive way? That must have been a challenging environment.
It is. And I think that's important always. I guess where you had the opportunity to bring people into your group, for me, it was always about trying to bring in difference, not bring in necessarily similar types of people. And for that reason, it meant that there was going to be conflict, there were going to be clashes, there was going to be some debate and discussion. And I guess that's one of the key roles of coaches and leaders, is either to nurture that, but to nurture it in a way that it is actually helpful and it grows the group, as opposed to something that could be quite divisive. Because as we know, if there's conflict going on and you're not dealing with it, then really that begins to fragment the team, fragment individuals, cliques develop, all those sorts of things can happen. And it's not to say that that doesn't happen, but provided that, you're aware of those things and your goal is to create that, if you like, that conflict, because in that, great ideas come, or ideas that somebody might have, are put to one side because they seem to be, either not practical or not relevant. Now, and in there are obviously good supporters, and there are other people who are not supporters, and they can flip from side to side at different times, depending on what it is that you're actually doing, whether it's, something right in front of us, or whether it's long-term planning, or whether it's something to do with data, or whether it's something to do with travel, whether it's something to do with food. A whole range of things go into that mix, and that does make it interesting, challenging, but I think pretty exciting to deal with over time.
There's obviously a lot of opportunity in what you do, and what any coach of a national team or any high performing team. There's obviously a lot of opportunities to make excuses. You've got selectors that are involved in picking the players and the resources you have within your unit, your team or your business. There's the competition, the other teams that have various movable parts. How do you build a culture where you avoid finding excuses in the things you can't control?
Yeah, not necessarily always that easy, but it does seem around this notion of leadership culture, and it does seem to me around developing the individual as their own best coach, that there is an inbuilt accountability to myself and then to the rest of the group. And, I think that doesn't necessarily mean that you exclude all excuses, but it does put you on the right track to at least identify when there are excuses being made or used to either an individual's advantage or the team. And then it gives you an opportunity to begin to deal with those. But
were there ever times, John, where you had some of those external things happening and you just felt like you couldn't control it, like it was something that was almost insurmountable? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, well, I guess one of the best examples of that was, we had an Ashes series in England in 2005, which we lost. And, it ranks as one of the great series of all time, simply because it was a close contest and there was just huge interest in England at the time for cricket. And of course, England won the series. So, from their point of view, it's fantastic. From our point of view, it was, terrible. But right through that series, I think we all, in our own ways, were seeing ourselves as either victims, and therefore, if you see yourself as a victim of something, then that enables this notion of excuses to be quite prevalent and almost quite standard and therefore acceptable. And I know for myself, when I look back on that series as a coach, I see it as one of my worst coaching periods, simply because I allowed myself to become a victim. I allowed myself to get caught up in the whole maelstrom of what was going on with the series. It was just so tense. There were so many things going on in the dressing room as well as outside the dressing room. And at the same stage, as you said, a lot of things that were uncontrollable, like England, were actually playing well for a change. The crowds were getting in behind the English team. So it was really a feeling of isolation almost when you went to a ground, because it was just this little small group of Australians, but surrounded by, the English team and English public. When we came back from that series, I had to justify my position as coach, because the board had said, well, if you've lost to the Poms, that's the worst thing you can do in sport, and particularly in cricket. So, we need a change. So it forced me to really look inside myself again. And I've been with the team some 6 years by that stage. And it made me ask a few questions. One was, could I still make a difference? Because that was really always important to me. It was really important to me that, that we're always going to be a leader. We were always going to be ahead of the game. We were trying to change the game. So was I still in a position to do that, at least in my thinking and my reading of the game and my desire to do that? And then, of course, I might feel that way, but did I still really passionately want to do it? Did I still want to, be away from home so much, be under the scrutiny of public and media and stakeholders so much? Did I want to necessarily be around 35-year-old children that you're kind of, helping to guide and support and do all those things? Did I really want to do that? So, and then the third question was, even if I had both of those, even if I answered both of those as yes, which I did, did I still have the respect of the senior players, you know? So I needed to check in with them. And so once I had those three things sorted out in my mind, then I was able to go to the board and say, well, this is where we're going for the next 20 months. This is how we're going to go about it. And this is what we might expect. And so from that, it enabled the launch pad of going back into the group. And that's where we, had a day and a half session of just pretty open review of what had happened in England amongst all of us. And that's where, I guess, excuses came to the fore. That's where various issues came to the fore, whether it be about the coach, whether it be about a player, whether it be about the way that we're going about doing things. And so we're able then in that forum, where everybody had the opportunity to talk openly and honestly, to really put to rest some of the things that had happened in England, and then set ourselves up for what this next part of the journey was going to be.
So, John, one of the things that just popped up from what you're saying there is, again, a correlation of whether you're in business with a team, whether you're working with a sporting team, whatever the case is. But when you have hindsight, obviously the hindsight is an incredible thing. And you mentioned that it was one of your best coaching periods then. What is it that you, as a leader for yourself, what did you learn, in going through that process? And what did you take away from that you then said, right, okay, I can see what didn't work. Now I need to do this. It's going to work. What was those things, some of those things that you learned?
Well, I think one of the most important learnings was, again, not to get caught on the dance floor so much. One of the things that I generally was good at doing before that, and I think I was good at doing after that, was reading the pulse of the team. Now, that was done by myself, being able to step back, but it was also because I could actually tap into a few of the players or support staff and maybe ask the right questions at the right time to hear what was going on. And during that tour, that just wasn't happening. So that was probably the biggest learning. And I think from a leader's point of view, in any organisation, that is so important, that you need to be in touch with your people, no matter how many levels down. Somehow you need to have a mechanism where you're in touch with the coalface, the work floor, and every layer in between that. And that means you've got to put time into doing that, and a way of going about doing that. And I think that's a really important part of being a leader. And so that means then too that your relationship with either your direct reports, or for me, support staff, is critical. Or, again, with the captain or the vice captain or the senior players, it's just critical that relationship is really strong and continuous, so that, again, they understand you, may not agree, and we might have some debate, but at least we both understand each other, and then our communication, albeit in different words, different times and in different ways, will be consistent back out through the troops, and so,
But it's hard to do that, isn't it? When everyone's under pressure and failure starts to become part of the narrative, and it hasn't been for a long time, it's kind of hard for everyone to do that, though, isn't it? Where when the pressure's off, you're able to. So in hindsight, again, what do you think, like a leader in a high pressure environment, maybe they're, whether it's sport or your sales are under pressure, your market's been disrupted, like what would be some of your top tips for still leading effectively whilst you're under personal pressure, and the team around you are also under that pressure and maybe starting to clam up a bit?
Yeah, look, it's still the same thing. One, you've got to give yourself time to think. Somehow you've got to get up on the balcony, whether that's for 10 minutes in a day, at the end of a day. Somehow you've got to clear your mind and sit up on that balcony and have a look back on what was happening in the day, or what was happening in that meeting, or what happened at that event, and look at it objectively. Then I think, if you have the luxury of some sort of data that might be relevant, then this is my thinking. This is what I think I see. What's some of the key numbers telling me here right at the moment? Does that support? Is that counter what I'm thinking? And the third thing will be, you've got to have one or two trusted people in the midst that you can go to. I can ring them up, or I can walk down the corridor and I can go into their room and I can shut the door and we can have a good conversation and I can get the answers that I'm looking for, or at least get some direction. So I think, they're the things that I would be doing all the time, just trying to take a moment, somehow create that space, look back at what's going on, review in line with, all the ways that we're hoping that we'd either play or the sort of results that we wanted to get. And that can be both positive and negative. If we're not getting the results, well, what's going on? If we are, then, well, how do we leverage from that for the next day or for the next event? And then, as I said, some metrics that from previous are the key things that you need to look at if things are going really well or not going really well. And they're the things that will give you some insight, and then just a couple of key people that you can trust, you can rely on. When I said before, the right people means that they're skilled, they've got expertise, and that's why they're in there. But when you come to them, they're going to tell you how it is.
Trust.
Right? So they're in tune with philosophy and directions and values and all that sort of stuff. But what they are good at is just telling you how it is right at that time.
They're going to call you on your BS. I mean, we need more. We all need a few more people around us that can call us on our BS, I reckon. There's not enough of that. Actually, what I'm hearing there from you, John, is effectively, I'm just hearing in my head the debrief process, Boo. It was.
I didn't want to say anything. Like, it's not for me to pump up my own tires, mate. But yeah,
it's that same thing. I don't know. It's called different things, or it's done slightly different ways, but that importance of actually looking at what was our objective, what was the result
objectively as well, without the personal emotional buy-in and the bias.
I think the thing but I think, and you're right, totally about a de-risk, but I think review, whatever you want to call it, but I think that's where business really misses the point, really lacks that feedback loop. That at the beginning of a day. So for me, business is in competition every day, whereas sporting teams, we kind of get this luxury of a set up pre-game time and preparation time, and then you go into the game. And obviously through game, individuals and teams, you're always constantly just adapting and adjusting to what's been thrown at you. But at the end of the day, you get a result, good or bad. And then you begin a review or debrief process to understand what went right, what didn't go right. And then you move back into the cycle, preparation, a little bit of adjustment from the last game, set up the new game. So business is, as I say, in competition every day. So they've only got a short period of time, maybe at the beginning of a day, where they can get a group together and say, right, what does the day look like? What do we expect from the day? What are our sort of indicators that we will be on track? And away you go. And the day takes its various shapes and forms, and you get things thrown at you that you didn't see. And then at the end of the day, either as a leader or as a group, what happened? Did we actually achieve what we set out to achieve? If we did, great. If we didn't, why not? And then how do we set up for the next day? And I just think it's far harder in business because it is competition every day. But I just don't think business does that very well. And so things just roll. Well, things just roll. Yeah. And they don't. They might have an offside every quarter, or they might have an offside every 6 months. But it's too late. It's too late.
What I've found, John, is the implementation of that in a business sense can't be done as, I guess, as you say, because you're competing or performing when you're in the game. You've got all the time to lead up, and it's very structured and deliberate. But in the business way of doing what you're saying, my view is, and this is something that I've learned from Boo as well, into a deeper level in what he teaches in the time since we've been mates, is that it's better. It's just a better do it in the moment. If something goes wrong, it's like, right, okay, let's spend 30 seconds, John. Let's go through that debrief. What was the outcome? What was the outcome we wanted? What was the result? What was the reason, and what's our response to that? Great. Could take 30 seconds, could take 5 minutes, could take half an hour, but we can deal with it. We can go, what action do we need to take from here? Take that action and move forward. But it does need to be very dynamic, and it has to flow continuously every day. Whereas if you try and save it up for the end of the day or the end of the week or the quarterly offsite, you're losing a lot of that that impact
Well,
of
you
the actual
do.
process.
You do. Look, I mean, what's the time now? In Queensland, it's a beautiful time. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, booze halfway through the day. But if we all look back at the start of the day to now, can we remember what actually happened? There's some bits and pieces that we remember, and generally they're either a bit of a highlight or a low light. But there's so many bits and pieces in between that are still relevant. And so, as you say, if you keep leaving that, it's gone. You've lost it, and there's no way of recalling that. So yeah, your feedback should be as immediate as you can make it, and of course as accurate as you can make it for it to have the most impact.
Yeah, I reckon it's like the bucket of relevance. You can only hold so much in the bucket up here, right? So the more
Yeah.
relevant that information is, the better outcomes you have.
Mhm.
So John, obviously when you were 9 years of age, you probably didn't realise you're going to coach one of the greatest Australian cricket teams. What happened? Like how did this journey unfold? Because for a lot of people, and we've got a whole generation here coming out of university, the 2019, 2021, the COVID kids moving into whatever field, that they're still full of dreams. How did you fulfill yours? Like what was the journey there? And someone asked me this question the other day: how much do you put down to nature, who you are, and how much do you put it down to the processes and the that you went through from when you were kind of earning money?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's no doubt that it's part of it. There's something in your genes, there's something in the environment that you run into, but ultimately you've got choices. So I think if we again go back to that word excuses, if we put it down to nature, if we put it down to the environment, then we're actually finding an excuse for not making a choice to be better every day, or better in what we do, or keep chasing dreams. So as I said, as a 9-year-old growing up in the backyard, I was playing cricket for Australia. That was it. That was non-negotiable, and I just kept chasing that. Became a professional cricketer. A whole range of things. Did go to university started off studying engineering, but unfortunately, engineering and I, a bit like, as I said before, ambition and ability, sort of went and didn't really become friends. And nonetheless, that was probably because of my sport, because I was just putting so much time into that, and the study just seemed to be getting in the road. But eventually I got back and did a human movement studies degree, but cricket was still at the forefront, and kept going, professional cricketer, and played for Queensland, not very successfully, but played for Queensland. And it was around that time that it was time to say, well, geez, I'm not going to make it as a cricketer. I've been overseas playing and a whole range of things, had some fantastic experiences, but in the end,
What sort of living is that, John? Like, are you're making good coin, or is it something that you're
no,
just living on noodles?
yeah, pretty well. I had a contract at Queensland, then I had two contracts in England, in Central Lakes League and Minor Counties League. But it was getting your airfares, it was getting a living, but you weren't putting anything in the bank. But that wasn't important, because you were really doing what you enjoyed doing, and things were going along pretty well.
How much do you think, John, that what I'm hearing is you were following a passion of yours? You're following something
Yeah.
you really, really love to do. How important do you feel that's been in you, by the sounds of it, despite what's happened? And I'd love to know what happened after you were like, okay, this realization hits where this is my passion, but I can't do it, right? But there's two questions, I suppose. One is, how important do you believe it is to actually follow those things that you're passionate about? And then how the heck did you recover from having to accept the fact that I'm actually not good enough for the actual playing part of it, to consolidate that and accept that, and then move into, I suppose, the coaching space?
Yeah, well, I didn't move into the coaching space for some time, but the actual professional sport coaching space for some time. But look, it's just still something that firstly, if you can follow your passion and then you can earn money from it, that's obviously the best of both worlds. But I think firstly, whatever you do, if you're not passionate about it, then I guess the old cliches, it's just hard work and it's not enjoyable, and everybody else around you feels that. So somewhere in there, whatever you do, you need to have a passion for it. Now, either that's because you really love doing it, or you can create the passion for it because you understand if you don't, then it does become hard work. And so therefore you need to love what you're doing. But I think it's still about dreaming. I just think, I always cast my back to that 9-year-old boy that you talked about, Boo, that I think we all grew up wherever, backyard or just at home or wherever we grew up with wonderful dreams. And then somehow in school, this concept of dreaming was pushed out of us, or at least pushed into the recesses of our minds, because it was all about basically, getting through your grades, then gradually going from year to year and hopefully moving on to universities or trades or wherever your future might lie. So the concept of dreaming kind of gets pushed back, but I'm very much one that wants to push the dreaming forward. So for me to move on from where I was, it was about then saying, well, that dream's finished, but what else? What's my next dream? And my next dream was around the degree I had, and it was in being in sport and recreation administration. And so, I went into recreation administration in Townsville City Council. I worked for the Commonwealth Games, 1982 Commonwealth Games in Brisbane. I became National Director of Australian Volleyball. And to me, wow, I'm still in sport, which is my passion. But now I get to sort of make some decisions around moulding and architecturally designing, sporting teams, organisations, people. And that seemed to me to be fantastic. However, with volleyball, they wanted to move the office to Canberra out of Brisbane, so I thought, if there's
Who
one
wants to
place
live there? Yeah.
if
Right.
there's one place I don't want to live, it was Canberra. So, it was time to move out, and I then got a teaching degree because again, it was somewhere in there. It was always about teaching people, helping people to be better at what they did. So I went into TAFE and got a diploma of education, and then started teaching in TAFE. But and so again, the dream there was, wow, this teaching thing, I can, become one of the, great teachers, or become a principal. That this notion of still moving up the chain, which I think is kind of an interesting concept in itself, insofar as when I look back at coaching, or I look at coaching of a sport or teaching, your most valuable coaches, teachers, and probably in business, your most valuable mentors and educators need to be at the ground roots level. So for young children to develop, you want your best teachers down there to give them the foundations of what's ahead of them. For sporting coaches or sporting environments, you want your best coaches down at those levels, because you want children to be as physically capable and able as possible then to cope with the demands of sport, because it throws a lot of things at them. And same in business, the whole onboarding process, really, that's where you want your best people to infuse, if you like those who are coming into the business, with the way it is around here, and how you can become a significant contributor, rather than just it being a tick and flick exercise. So
there's something really telling there, John. You said, "Oh, I did my diploma in teaching," and then I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be a great teacher. I'm going to be a principal." And it's like, I'm not just going to play cricket. I'm going to play cricket for Australia. How often does your mindset, and I think this is something really unique to the people that, do great things, is when you start something small. I mean, Sean and I started this podcast, but we want it to be the greatest podcast ever. So, but how often when you start something do you have that mindset, which is, I really want to take this and run with it and make it something big?
Always. And I suppose if we kind of roll the picture or the movie forward a little bit, I did a range of things. Ended up going to America, to Canada, I should say, and getting a Master of Arts so I could come back and be a professor. And so that was another dream. I've been a professor in academia, and a couple of other things happened along the line. But in '94, the Queensland Bulls coaching job came up, and Jeff Thompson, who was a legend of Australian cricket, was the head coach, been there for 4 years, and Queensland had never won a Sheffield Shield. As I said, I'd been part of that a long time ago, and pretty unsuccessful part of my career. But anyway, it was a little part there. And so I was going to then apply for this job. And I said, well, that career of mine, that doesn't really stack up too well against Jeff Thompson and everybody else that was applying. So how am I going to convince the Queensland board that I should be the person, not only to replace Jeff Thompson, but for them to place faith in me that by doing so, Queensland would somewhere win a Sheffield Shield, which they'd never done before. So that was my watershed moment, I think, in terms of, I guess, my life, and certainly my coaching life, is that it actually just made me stop and try and work out me, just try and work out why I did what I did. Why do I say what I do? Why do I do what I do? What do I believe in? So that was a period of time just going out into I used to run a bit, so that was my quiet place. I'd go out and try and think all these things through, from that 9-year-old boy in the backyard, through school, through all the various people that I'd met, through all the situations that I'd been in, good and bad, and sort of collapse that into a philosophy of leadership, or in this case, coaching. And right at the top of that is my vision. It's just part and parcel of who I am. So wherever I go, whatever I do, whether it's with a group or whether it's with an individual, I just see in them something special, something that can be done, provided that you want to do it. I'm not going to necessarily, I'm going to create environments, as I was talking about before, learning environments and support and systems and processes around you, but ultimately you've got to want to do it, so, but firstly, it's about creating a picture that hopefully is really inspiring and aspiring for the individual or the team to want to have a run at.
And how did you create the value? Like what was your value proposition at that point to win that job? Because obviously that set you on a very specific pathway for many years.
Yeah. Well, I still sort of remember that saying to them, look, if you want a coach that is going to win the Holy Grail, the Sheffield Shield, then I'm not your coach. But I said that the picture will be, if you choose me, then we're going to dominate this domestic competition for the next 10 years. That's our, and you'll see in the background, an Everest, which was coined when I started with the Australian team, but it's still the same symbol. So we were going to dominate domestic cricket for 10 years. And I said, somewhere in there, then we'll win a Sheffield Shield. But not only will we win a Sheffield Shield, we'll be able to repeat that because we understand how, rather than just the end goal being this Sheffield Shield. And then talk through a few different things, but must have resonated with a few of them. So I was appointed then head coach in '94, and we won our first Sheffield Shield in that first year of my coaching. Now, I was just one part of that. There's a lot of other contribution to that, but I like everything, I suppose. When you set about change and you're doing things differently, then if you can gain some early wins, some early success, it just really gives you a momentum to not only for you, but everybody around you.
So do you mention that those that are listening to this podcast, John has a backdrop behind him, and there's an Everest hidden within you, which is sitting behind over his shoulder. Explain a little bit more about that. You touched on it briefly then, John. What does that mean? What's that statement mean? And how can people apply that in their own lives?
Well, so I coached Queensland for 5 years, and we won a couple of Shields, we won a couple of one-day titles, and I then had to run. Well, and again, going back to where we started, I didn't actually have a dream of being this coach for Queensland for a start. But when the job came up, I thought, I think I can do that, But I had to double check with a couple of, Alan Border was playing then, and Ian Healy and a couple of people. I had to check that it was they were for real, and then I'd have a run at it. So by the time the Australian job came up, which was in 1999, I did have a coaching pedigree behind me. And I was, again, successful in my presentation to the board to get the role. And so in my first meeting with the team, and what's important to understand with national teams, certainly as a cricket team, an Australian cricket team, is that you do only come together in competition. So in other words, there's no pre-season, there's no off season where you can do some stuff. You come together about 3 days out from, in this case, a test series, which was against Pakistan and India. And so while some people knew a bit about me, there was really nobody in the room there was no Queenslanders in the room that understood me totally. I'd coached against everybody that was in the room. So firstly, I laid out some ground rules about me and what I expected of me, and then what I expected of them. But then for me, it was about really hitting them between the eyes with the notion that you're a good team, but you're not a great team. And so the concept was that we were going to go on a journey to Everest together. And, Everest symbolized this notion of the top of the world, teamwork, risk, collaboration, hard work, preparation. And still, even if you do all the right things, there's still no guarantee of reaching the top, but nonetheless, the only way that you possibly can reach the top is to do all those sort of things. So that was kind of the starting point for them, because again, I think for all, firstly for a business or a leader or a founder or an owner of a business or a board or whatever, that's kind of the big wheel. That's the organization. And so you can create your vision and so on. And the important thing I think always about vision statements is I never wanted to be able to cut and paste it for somebody else, like somebody can cut and paste mine and use it, or I can cut and paste theirs and use it for me. I wanted to differentiate. And so then Australia had its vision, around at that time, it's pretty similar still, I think, that they wanted to create cricket as Australia's favourite summer sport. So I didn't think that vision would sit very nicely within a cricket dressing room, within a playing dressing room. So this is where basically then I encapsulated this notion of Everest, and then Everest related to, well, we're going to change the game. And it also then related to history, where I talked about the Invincibles, which was a famous Australian sporting team in 1948 that went to England and were undefeated, and they were given a label of the Invincibles. So I said, our journey, when it comes to an end, and that's what I said, I had no idea when that will be, when we all kind of disband, that what we will have achieved should, in a sense, be the same as the Invincibles, meaning that we would have done something special in the game so that we might have been accorded a label as well of what we'd achieved in that period of time. And so they were the kind of sentiments expressed to the team initially. And then, of course, it was, what else? Well, how does that translate itself into daily operations, your technical development, physical, and all those sort of things. But without that picture, then if we're looking at technical skills or physical skills, mental skills or tactical skills, they had to align themselves with this journey of changing the game. And so that was the constant thread through everything that we did.
And I think that's a key element of greatness. What you've said there is, we're going to be this. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we're going to be it. And then it just sets the benchmark, the Teslas, the SpaceXs, the Blue Origins, the stuff that's so big and such a massive statement. And I think where businesses make a big mistake is they go, we're going to be the greatest in 12 months. And that pressure and the fact that it's not going to happen because no one can do that, creates negative energy, right? And I think if you have that, it seems that if you have these great visions, but you detach yourself from time, but you really focus on the granular details day to day, it's the vision just falls into place.
Yeah, I think you're right, Boo. I don't think that I've really ever set a timeline on a vision. Maybe there's a timeline on strategies, as you're saying, and then how you operationalize that, on a monthly, weekly, daily, hourly basis, because that's what you can more easily measure. Then they're the things that keep you on track.
And that's where I think people come unstuck, though. I think they think strategy is like a vision statement is like, oh, let's sit in a room, thrash it out. Like it's a vision statement's not really a vision statement. It's this is going to be our essence. You got to know what that is.
Yeah, no, totally. And that's what I say. I think in a lot of places you can just cut and paste, and even down to values and principles, people can cut and paste those, and it doesn't matter. You could be blindfolded and not know the business's name because it's exactly the same stuff.
So, John, one of the things in the pre-interview or pre-podcast information was that mentions here in your bio about a step-by-step methodology to create and maintain peak performance. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Like, what are some of the foundational things that you believe that people need to do or consider or be aware of? And I'm sure we've probably touched on a couple of them already, but what are some of those steps so that people can kind of get an understanding of, okay, where the hell do I start if I actually want to start performing at a higher level, at a peak level? What the hell do I do?
Yes, well, we have sort of touched on them, and it does relate to this concept of Everest, and because first we've got to have a foundation, which is base camp. And whether you're an individual, whether you're a leader of a team, there needs to be a starting point. Obviously, as I said before, there's a vision, which is kind of that's the summit. That's where we want to be. But where are we right now? As an individual, I will often want people to understand when they've had a really good day or a good project, good meeting, whatever it might be. What did I do? So firstly, identify when that was. So you need a specific time or event or whatever. And then what did I do? So what was in my control? Because they're the elements of you being able to deliver success and not only deliver success, but continually improve on what those, if you like, basic reference points are. And that's kind of the same for the leader. When I coach well, when I led well, what did I do? The team, when we played well, what was happening? And when you move to team, to me, and also the leader, one of the really important things to make sure that you include in there is what a term sacrificial plays. And that's a term borrowed by an AFL coach, David Parkin, who I met when we won the Sheffield Shield. Carlton won the flag that year, and we got together and had a good chat because he mentioned a couple of things in his summary of why the season was so successful, and one was getting on board the northbound locomotive. So that's all around culture. The stakeholders, the players, the support staff, everybody believed that they were on this locomotive, which was unstoppable. And then on top of that, he mentioned, well, we also not only measure the normal data, the normal metrics of how you win games, but we also wanted to look at the contributions of players away from those normal numbers. So, in AFL, it was kind of hardball gets or number of kicks or contested possessions, all those sort of numbers that everybody has. But he was looking at players who were putting their teammates in those positions to get those numbers. And he called those sacrificial plays. And in the end, he said something along the line, there were 64 sacrificial plays in a game. We never lost a game. So that kind of starts the metric, if you like, so understanding what you control, base camp and leader and team and individual. What am I what are those sort of things that I think are really important that I should be doing? So you move from there and that sort of, it ignites your strategy, so from base camp, you move to your game plan, and everybody needs a game plan, individual, leader or team. You just need a game plan for winning, so that's based on that foundation. And so that becomes your framework. But as I was saying before, nothing goes according to plan. Nothing ever goes according to plan. So therefore, from game plan, you need to mobilise what I term your set plays, and these are your controllables. These are the things that I know that I must do, either as an individual or leader or a team, that puts me in a position to have a successful meeting, a successful event, a successful day, a successful game, whatever that is in front of you. It doesn't guarantee it, as we said about Everest before. There is absolutely no guarantees, but there is a guarantee if you're not doing this, that you won't ever head in the right direction, or you won't head in the right direction for very long.
And this information, John, I believe you've written a few books. Is there somewhere that someone can get a little bit more depth of some of this stuff in what you've actually written about?
Yeah, look, they can go to my website, buchanancoaching.com. There'll be a means to kind of read that or tap into me. And then there is an ebook called Live Better as Possible, which talks about a whole lot of these things in different little stories as we go through. And then finally, the last step is obviously going back to Boo's debrief or the review. So once we put in place our set plays, then hopefully we're going in the right direction. What are the results we're getting? What does that look like? Review them. How do we sustain that? How do we improve that? and then it keeps circling on itself from there.
Fantastic. And I can only imagine the experiences you've had, traveling the world with sporting teams and having to move your own expectations or your own dreams, but also keeping that thread of sport there from when you were 9 years old. So in your journey, I'd imagine you've learnt a hell of a lot. If you could go back to the 9-year-old John that we spoke about earlier, what's some advice that you would give him to set him up for life?
I think certainly for a start, keep dreaming and chase your dreams as much as you possibly can. And with that, then believe that you're capable of chasing that dream, because that's where I came unstuck a number of times. I think that, I doubted in my abilities, or, there were detractors of what I was doing. And so that threw doubts into my mind till I got to that point of me understanding me. Now, I don't think a 9-year-old is capable of that. They can understand their small world a little bit, maybe. But firstly, just keep dreaming, chase your dreams, and back yourself all the way.
Awesome. No, that's great, John, for your contribution both to the game, to allowing our great nation to have such an extended period of success, and not to mention, as a Queenslander, getting us out of the muck and a trophy in the trophy cabinet. John, look, that's fantastically insightful. I'm sure we'll have another chat, because the depth of the conversations we can have with you are probably pretty epic. So thanks so much for joining Sean and I on the Few today, John. Really, really appreciate you taking the time.
Appreciate it, John. Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of The Few. Thank you to our partners, Afterburner, for team building, development and alignment. We understand now how important it is to have the right people around you. Get them on board with where you want to go. Momentum Media, the largest industry publisher in the country, connecting your business to the Australian community. ICMI, Australia's premier speaker bureau, representing the few that do fulfill their life's purpose. And finally, Sean's Inner Circle, the business coaching organisation for small and medium enterprises looking to make that next step. Thanks again for listening in and downloading today. Please leave a review on whatever platform you are currently listening to this podcast, and reach out to our partners who can help you make the transition to the few.
Yeah, no, look, I really enjoyed it too, Boo and Sean. Thanks very much for having me on.
Yes.